different books and things in research, we have said that there are 6 worship styles. The first is an evangelistic worship style, such as a Bill Hybels, who has a seeker service, or you might look at Jerry Falwell, who has an evangelistic service. It could be Southern Gospel evangelistic, or it could be a boomer or a buster evangelistic. Number 2, Bible exposition. There are churches where they are driven by the teaching of the Word, such as a Chuck Swindoll when he was a pastor, John MacArthur would be a Bible teaching ministry. Charles Stanley is a Bible teaching ministry. The third is a renewal service. A Jack Hayford. People come to touch God, to be touched of God. They come to be revived every Sunday morning. It's camp meeting every Sunday morning. It's Friday night at camp, but every Sunday morning. And so some people come to touch God. Number 4 is a body life service. It's small groups. Koinonia means fellowship. And since the quality of life is measured in one's relationship to other people, maybe you're going to have another service where you have a lot of koinonia, a lot of high touch, where people get to know one another. Number 4, liturgical. This is primarily a Presbyterian or Lutheran or Episcopal type of worship service. But when you say liturgical, go back to Acts chapter 13. The Bible says, as they ministered to the Lord and fasted. Let me ask you, how do you minister to God? I know how you pastors minister when you go into a hospital room. I know how you minister when you go into a home and a young couple is thinking of a divorce. But how do you minister to God? In the same way. You glorify God, you magnify God, you praise God, you lift God up. When you minister to God, that's called liturgy. Ministry there comes from the Greek word liturgeo, from which we get the word liturgy. And therefore, think in terms of maybe a worship service with the new praise choruses. The new praise choruses sing to God. When I was a kid, we sang testimony choruses. Christ for me, every day with Jesus, and all of our singing was what Jesus has done for us. But ministry to God is when you spend time worshiping Him. Now, number 6 is the congregational worship service. The congregational worship service, you know what that is? The congregational is basically the church for the people, the church by the people, the church of the people. It is basically your low church as opposed to what has historically been called the high church. Now, what I'm trying to say is determine what other type of worship service you could have. However, let me throw 2 curves at you. Curveball number 1, worship comes out of your heart. It's not a mask, and it's not a uniform. You can't stand up and really spend all of your time in one form of worship and then put on a different face, a different mask, a different uniform, and go be somebody else. You have to be yourself. And so it may be that if you go to a different kind of worship service, you may have a different kind of worship leader. As an illustration, I see more and more churches, primarily among the young and staff, because baby boomers and busters are more of a team when it comes to worship. My generation, the older, we were almost the man who has to do it all. We believed that the isolated person had to be up there. Now, with the young people, they're a team. And when I look at young teams, they're very happy for someone else to do the preaching. Now, if you get to my generation, I'll look at you, Dick, our generation, we want to do all the preaching. Why? Because God's called us to do the preaching. But I look at a young team, and the pastor is very willing to have his youth pastor have a church service on Saturday or a church service, I think of Arizona, and since they get most of their busters at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, their 11 o'clock Sunday morning worship service is basically high-tech, high, loud music, and a lot of kids there. Now, I don't know that I could do that, but let's look at what's happening in the world today. Now, I've thrown you 2 curveballs. So, let's look at the different kinds, but let's understand those curves. Number 5, go to 2 services even if your present auditorium is not filled. Some people say, well, I don't need a second worship service. We're only half filled. Well, you want to go to a second worship service, but if your auditorium is only half filled, you don't want to use that auditorium. The second part of that says start the second service in a Sunday school room or a chapel to build intimacy. So if you're going to start another service and it's going to be smaller, don't put them like BBs in a box that'll rattle. Take a Sunday school room and rebuild it, refurbish it, put in curtains, put in pews, put in some stained glass, make it like a chapel with some worship atmosphere, and make it intimate for those who come early in the morning. You said, boy, that would cost money. Well, now think about it. Suppose you get 50 extra people. Just to get 50 extra people. 50 people, and the average worship attendant gives $12 per person per Sunday, and you begin to take 50 times 12, what does that work out to be? $1,200 a month? That's, you could afford if you begin to look in terms of what these people can do for you. Now, number 6, talk about the fear factor, or innovitis, the fear of innovation. In the last tape, I went through the fear factors. Talk about those often, because people have questions. If you don't answer their questions, it's like a fester, it's like a soar. It'll grow and it'll fester on you. But if you answer them and openly talk about the problems, you give people confidence in your leadership. You know what the problems are. You know where you're going, and you know how to get there. It'll help you as a leader to talk about the fear factors, not once, but several times in this process. Now, number 7, call it an experiment. If you're going to add a second worship service, call it an experiment. You see, if people think that this service is going to be forever and ever and ever and ever, they're not sure they want to make that commitment. But you say, well, let's try it for a 12-week period. Then maybe they are much more willing to go along with it. Number 8, announce plans 5 weeks before the first service. If you're going to go to another worship service, 5 weeks earlier, begin to announce the plans to give people time to make their plans, to mentally and emotionally and spiritually adjust to what's coming. Now, let me talk to you about group decision making. How do you get people to make decisions individually, and how do you get a group to make a decision? Don't think of a decision product, think of a decision process. Now, in your notes, I want you to put 3 steps to a decision. First, ask the people to raise their hands. Raising of a hand is a non-threatening and a non-commitment. And you say to yourself a question like this: folks, if we had 3 identical services, same preacher, same choir, same everything, but we had 3 identical services. It's 6 p.m. on Saturday, 8:30 a.m. on Sunday, and 11 a.m. on Sunday. Let's assuming you have your service at 11 a.m. I want everyone here to vote and tell me what would be your preference. See, it's a survey. You ask that question, if, same preacher, same music, same choir, same ushers, same everything, when would you like to go? You are coming to the people now, and you're asking them, and you ask for a raise of their hands. Now, let me tell you what you want to do. I'd look around the room, and I would get maybe Renee, who is chairman of the Women's Auxiliary, to do the count. Or you might look around Victor, who is chairman of the church board, get him to do the count. And then have people put their hands up and then get an actual count. You see, when people count, it's creditable. They're going to be shocked at how many people want to come at other times. Now, you do the Saturday night knowing that you probably won't do a Saturday night, but you throw that number in there to stretch their thinking. You know you won't have a Saturday night, but you give them the option. And then you say to your chairman of your board, Victor, look at that, will you? Let's say you had 7 people who want a Saturday night service. Let's just come up with a number and say you had 42 people who want an 8:30 service and 52 people who want an 11 o'clock service. If Victor is the chairman of your board, then you'll say, Victor, the people have spoken. We've got 42 people here who want a service at another time. We have to do research. Now, to do the research, you're going to take the tapes. You're going to do the forms that we filled out. But you don't make the initiation. You let the people by their vote. All right? That's count number one, a raised hand. People haven't come in. Count number two, a paper survey. Come back 2 or 3 weeks later, and maybe you get the chairman of your board, Victor, and Victor on a Sunday morning announces we're thinking of looking at times. And we did a survey, but we'd like you to fill out a survey again. And this time it's a paper survey. And you pass it out on a Sunday, and at a certain time, Victor can make an announcement, the pastor makes an announcement, and here you're going to talk about times, type of service. You're going to talk about other things that they want, and you have people check it off, and they pass it in. But this time, you don't have them sign it. We do our research. We've come to the place now where we think that we ought to have a new worship service in 5 weeks. So you announce it, and you pass out a sheet of paper. I'm looking for people who will be seed members in that first service. And so you give them 3 opportunities to respond, but you don't make the big commitment the first time. What man ever asked a woman to marry him the first date? You know, you have to win her heart, you have to win her confidence, win her approval, and then you ask a woman to marry you. And so go to your church. Remember, the church is a woman, and you have to romance this church, and you have to slowly ask this decision to go to a second service. Now, number 9 in your outline, begin in September or March. If you're going to start a service, don't start it at the wrong time. Don't start it in June. Don't start it in December. Begin in September or March. Now, the next thing says, follow the laws of the Two-Hump Camel. Follow the law of the Two-Hump Camel. And you see in your notes that there's an S, F, W, S, S. Now, it stands for summer is a dip. And we know in churches, unless there are seasonal or sometimes vacation activities, most churches will follow this two-humped camel. Attendance goes up in the fall, down in the winter. Up in the spring, down in the summertime. I want you to write this statement in your notes. Church attendance gets energy from culture. 100 years ago, it was the opposite. Culture got its energy from the church. But we live today, and we have to minister where we are today, and church attendance gets energy from culture. So, plan a service, plan a second service when people are inclined to come, when visitors will come, when the most of your marginal members will come. That's the time to start a service. When your marginal members are dropping out for the summer, that's not the time to start a second church service. Now, number 10, begin with a 3-month experiment. And you ask people, when you give them that piece of paper, I'm looking for about 50 people who will commit themselves to ministry for the next 12 weeks. September, October, November, or October, November, December. I need you to make a commitment to get up early, to come to the early service. Just like you plant seeds to grow corn in the backyard, we're going to plant you to grow this service to reach new people. Your presence, your prayers, your commitment will help this new service grow. And so become a seed member. You said, by the grace of God, I will be here unless providentially hindered. And after 12 weeks, you can go back to the regular service, if whatever God leads you to do. But ask people to give you 3 months or about 12 weeks, whatever date, when you're going to begin, and give them a termination date so they can carry through strong right to the end. Now, number 11, recruit seed members. Now, seed members are these people who are going to start this worship service with you. When we talk about the seed members, ask your members to pray about this. Say, would you pray and ask God, can God, you use me by coming early, by getting the kids there early, by us being there present on a Sunday morning, disrupting our routine to be at church? Would you do that? Ask them. And then pass out a yes card. I like the word yes. Yes. You can count on me, Pastor, to be there for the next 12 Sundays, unless providentially hindered. And have them sign their name, and again, put their telephone number down and their address, because you're going to build in that new service its own homogeneous nature. You're going to mail to them, and you're going to telephone them, and you're going to, from this group of people, build, just like you're going to build a church across town, you're going to build it right in your own sanctuary. Now, number 12 says, build loyalty. Now, when you talk about building loyalty, there's lots of things you can do. You're going to do a special mailing to just these people. All right, you're going to have special coffee for them when they arrive on Sunday morning. Maybe on a special day, you're going to get people, parking lot greeters are going to go out there and open the car door for them and welcome to the first service, the dawn service, the first time, whatever you want to call that service. You're going to have this list. You're going to do some mailing. You're going to do some phoning. You're going to create esprit de corps among these people, and they're going to be excited about the first service, and it's the first light service, whatever you happen to call it. Now, number 12, appoint staff members from among the seed members.